digital realm, where unseen threats prowl and guardians stand ever watchful, a remarkable innovation emerges. Today, we embark on a journey into the heart of Windows telemetry, guided by Jonathan Johnson, Principal Windows Security Researcher at Huntress. Together with your hosts, Michael Haag and Paul Michaud, we shall explore JonMon, a pioneering tool that illuminates the hidden pathways of system activity, offering defenders a new lens through which to observe and protect. Join us as we delve into the depths of this groundbreaking creation and uncover the future horizons it opens for cybersecurity. In the vast and intricate ecosystem of the digital realm, where
Hey, happy Friday. Sorry about that.
We're actually live on a Friday?
Yeah, I know. It's not a Tuesday this time for those who are keeping track.
Or Wednesday. It's Wednesday,
Yeah.
My dudes.
Could be Monday. I don't know.
Good times.
But yeah, it looks like we're good on all the channels. Yeah, happy Friday. Oh, sorry, I was running back. I need to get coffee. But we got a really cool episode today, Paul. I'm excited.
Yeah. Coffee did you get? I had to make a second batch because the first one got cold from when the tractor got stuck. So that was
Red Rooster. I got some.
Yeah.
They were closing
the
out.
atomic one?
No, it's the Red Rooster coffee from Virginia, and it's a Christmas blend that they come out with. That's like my all-time favorite. I can't remember what it's called right now off the top of my head.
Yeah.
So yeah, I share it often on Twitter, but I don't think anyone else buys it but me.
Mike single-handedly just buying it all.
It was last call, and I was like, I need a 2-pound bag. Yeah,
exciting times. We got Johnny.
Yes, we got Johnny. Let's find him. Let me push more buttons. Johnny, welcome.
What up? How are you?
What's up, dude?
How are you guys doing today?
Good. It's Friday.
Yeah.
Atomic Friday.
Paul, how's that tractor treating you?
When it's not stuck in a ditch, it's treated great.
We don't really have those problems where I'm at because it doesn't really snow. I mean, when it does, everybody just shuts everything down. So it's kind of nice that way.
So we got like 1.5 feet last night. Wasn't really expecting it. It just kind of was like here. And then I had 1.5 feet to go deal with. So that was a good time. But,
wow. 1.5 feet.
Snow is expected.
That much.
Yeah, good times.
That's a lot of snow.
I've been very excited for this and waiting for Johnny to write the code as I eagerly awaited for many moons. And it finally has come to fruition. The JonMon episode.
I was remembering, Johnny, we met at, I think it was Texas Cyber Summit. Was that like 2 years ago?
It was ages ago. Yeah. I mean, JonMon version 1's been out for, I mean, I could probably go look back at the first, September 6th of 23 is when I pushed out the latest binary update. So, I mean, we're in 25 now. So we're a year and a half. So,
yeah. It's been a hot minute.
It's been a hot minute. 2.0 wasn't really, I kind of took like a hiatus, like a 6-month hiatus and did other stuff. And then I was like, okay, I'll kind of start back up on this again. And I mean, it's been fun. I mean, it's definitely evolved. For those that are curious, I promised to release it. It's done. I mean, I was just telling them before this, I mean, the code's been done for like 1.5 months, 2 months. I mean, it's just like, what's really getting me, and for anybody that ever like releases projects will understand this, it's the documentation. I mean, I just don't want to do that sometimes. And so that's really, it's the laziness of that's been holding me back. But I'm excited to talk to you guys about it. And this is kind of like, I woke up this morning, I was like, man, I'm actually talking about JonMon 2.0 live, showing it off. I kind of got to release it now. And so I was thinking about that this morning. So I was finishing up documentation this morning.
Well, like, do you have to release it?
No, I don't have to.
We'll just show it, and then everybody can just stick with 1.0.
Oh, I don't. Yeah. And the thing is, like, there is, I mean, they are pretty vastly different. So it is I don't know. So but yeah,
Let's do it.
excited to talk about it. You mean just like demo it and I'll let you do your slides. My bad, sorry.
Oh no, we have like
This is the single slide, so
Yeah,
other than that,
this
so
is
we'll
it.
just jump right into it. We'll start off with some questions, then we'll go into
Yes.
the actual thing. Okay, so
Yeah,
three things.
my first question. Well, do we want to do who we are and all this stuff, or just
I
get
mean, we
into
probably
it?
should, just in
Okay.
case other people don't have any idea who we
Oh.
are.
Yes. So speaking of introducing us, we have a lot of new subscribers. So it's been a while. But yeah, sure. Do you want to go first, Paul?
Sure. I am Paul Michaud.
Paul.
I'm a team lead threat hunting at Unit 42 on the managed services team.
And I'm
That
Michael
is
Haag. Oh, that's good. I figured you're done.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, Michael Haag, principal threat researcher at Splunk, and our special guest.
I guess this is where I introduce myself. My name is Johnny Johnson. I promise that's my real name. And I am the principal product researcher for Windows EDR at Huntress.
Do you tell people often that is your real name? Like, do people think
Well,
you're
yeah,
joking?
because when I give people my ID, they look at me and they think it's a fake often. I mean, it's let's be honest. My parents were not very creative with my name. I mean, it's like they said they used the same name twice. I mean, it's Johnny Johnson. You know, I have some friends that will make fun of me and call me Johnny John Johnson, because some people think my middle name is actually John. So
Okay. I mean, that's fair. It's valid.
yeah,
That's good.
I didn't know this actually legitimately was like a thing that you run into. The ID
100%,
story is
my whole life.
quite-
yeah.
Was that a common thing when you like first turned 21 or try to like go to a bar or something and people just like straight up think it was just
Sometimes, I mean, it kind of depends. I mean, with any bar, I mean, it kind of depends if they actually look at the ID or if they're just like, collecting a paycheck. But I mean, if someone was like genuinely cared, I'd get like a look. I'm like, listen, dude, I have zero control over this. So please let me in this bar. But it's only happened a couple times like that. So
good times. All right. JonMon. So before we go into actually like showing it off, let's do like a little quick Q&A. First,
Yep.
What is JonMon?
Good question. So JonMon was a project I started. Oh man, I want to say. I mean, I probably started it a couple years, 2-3 years ago. And it was, to be honest with you, it was a way for me to get into Windows internals and development. I don't have a development background. I'm still not a developer, but I wanted to deal with a lot of these kind of internal mechanisms that I was reading about, and I kind of got tired of using other tools. When I started my career, I reversed sysmon with the help of some friends like Matt Graber, and I was like, man, this is awesome. And then I got really big into telemetry and data, and I was like, man, I wonder if I could go grab this thing. And then I realized there was a limitation. That limitation is, well, these sensors don't give you that, so you have to go get it yourself. And so it started off as a small project. I just did like basic kernel callbacks, and I was like, hey, this is cool. And then it kind of evolved into, I think I could write like a open source sensor that like no one should probably ever use but me, because it might crash their box. But and then over time just learned how to deal with these internal mechanisms. I mean, the reason why I know internals the way I do is mostly because because of JonMon, because of playing with it. And that's essentially, it's just a homebrewed at-home sysmon, if you really want to call it that. It's just a telemetry sensor. It doesn't do anything fancy. Does not do all like the blocking. Doesn't have a response. Doesn't have any of that. It's just collects a bunch of telemetry that are on the endpoint. And if you want to, ship it off to like a SIM like Sentinel, absolutely could. People have done it. I've done it. And so it's just an at-home sensor for Windows. Specifically x64. Does it work on ARM? Yes, but it does work on ARM. Shout out to Olaf for that and Matt Graber. But I hate ARM, and so it compiles for ARM, and I can ship to someone with ARM, and it'll run. But I wouldn't say that's supported, So
It does things.
it works, but if it stops working, it's not my fault.
That's on you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I got you. So what are obviously learning for you is like learning the internals and how to collect the data and seeing the different parts of it. What are some use cases that you've used for it, or potentially other people have kind of talked about, like in actually utilizing it?
Well, I think a couple things. First and foremost, it's having, you know, publicly documented code that shows you how these mechanisms work. It's like, hey, I want to go collect, you know, process creation telemetry, and it's like, I wonder how someone went and did this. I don't know if I would necessarily say, you know, copy paste my code, but there's a way to look at that. Another thing is, if you want to play with like kind of obscure data and you have the ability to program something, you know, I know some people who have like updated the code base a little bit, compiled it, and then they got to play with the data themselves. Another thing is, you know, comparing it to other sensors that are out there. You know, I've heard people run it side by side with Sysmon. I've heard people run it out there with more commercial tooling and compare it. So it's just one of those things. It's, you know, I think the difference about JonMon was it's a homebrewed sensor that was created by a detection engineer. And a lot of the sensors that you see out there is they're not created by detection engineers. They're created by devs, and devs are great. I mean, you cannot build a commercial sensor without a real dev. But a lot of times there's not a lot of detection engineering thought process going behind it. And so when you look at these events that are in JonMon 1.0, it was what really matters to detection engineering. What do we need in order to actually be successful at our job? And so, yeah, I've heard people just playing with it, running like atomic test harnesses, red team it with it, play with it. Everything's documented, so you can kind of go play with it yourself on there. So that's a couple use cases that I've heard from people.
Yeah, that's extensive. That's quite a bit of like folks using it, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I wasn't, to be honest, when I released it, I didn't think anybody was going to touch it, and I was like, that's okay. And then I've heard some people use it, and you know, I've actually learned a lot from like requests coming from people. You know, like 2.0 has a lot of, actually one of the things that are built in 2.0 are because of you, Mike. So which like the config, JonMon 2.0 now has a config, and that's because of you. Otherwise, you know, other people brought up a config, and I was like, nah. And then yeah, and but it has a config now. Is it as extensive as Sysmon? No, but I'll show that here in a minute. But yeah, there's a lot of people using it. I've heard people wanting to use it in like test in training courses. So use it instead of like Sysmon, or compare it and kind of ask the question, okay, like say if we have an image load from one sensor, what you know metadata can we pull with that? And you might see something in Sysmon, but you're going to get more metadata or different metadata inside of JonMon. And the question is like, why is that? And like, where does that come from? And so for training purposes, that's very useful as well.
That's awesome.
So what I hear is if you are using this and want features added, send it to Mike, and then Mike will tell Johnny, and then Johnny will just build it.
That's true. That's the real answer. Someone did ask me to get it to, I guess it wasn't working good on like, you know, like Windows Server 2012 or something. And I was.
That wasn't me,
like,
right?
It was not you, but I think my response, I was like, I'll look into it, and then I was just like, you know, I still have not yet fixed that, which I don't even know what the problem is. So,
is 2012 even still supported?
No, I mean, kind of my thought process, if I'm being honest, is if it doesn't run on like Windows, I think it's like 19045, which is the oldest one that I have, Windows 10 19045, all the way to, well, 20, I think it's 24H2 it works on. You know, if it's up between those, sorry.
Good to go.
But I will say, you know, that being said, I mean, any feature requests with 2.0, anything like that, like, I mean, send it my way. I'm more than happy. It's not like something I'm every night I'm like, you know, clicking away on JonMon. I have other projects, but I'm happy to look at it and add things.
I think one of the new ones you added the two was AMSI, right? You pulled in AMSI events.
Yeah, it was definitely a pain. But yeah, I definitely did AMSI. I can show that off. I can actually, I mean, I can walk you guys actually through the whole code base. I mean, if you guys
let's go into some code, see what JonMon is.
Cool. Let's do it live.
Run it live. Let me open this up here and then go over to present and see how this works. Share screen. It's easiest with 2 monitors. Window, JonMon. Sorry, I'm just thinking out loud here. You guys see JonMon?
We will now. There it is.
All right, so for those that don't know, there is a private repo called JonMon-private. This is because GitHub doesn't allow me to have multiple branches and lock one of the branches. So if anyone from GitHub is listening to this, please make that a feature. That would be the sickest thing ever, because I've been working off of 2 projects forever. So with inside of JonMon 2.0, there's a couple of like important aspects. You know, there is an updated diagram mapping of how this works, so I can walk through this. There is the JonMon service binary, and that's going to be in user mode. This is going to process a JSON config file, which I'll show here in a moment. And this is where you basically, it's a bunch of Booleans. It's basically, you know, you want this yes or no, true or false. It ships it over. It parses this. It knows, like the user mode binary knows which process or which telemetry mechanisms are supported in user mode versus kernel mode, and it'll actually ship over what to enable inside of the driver via a device IO control, an ioctl, and then events are shipped down to the user mode binary via trace logging ETW. So for those that like JonMon 1.0, the driver before is just shipping stuff straight to a manifest CTW provider, and then that was getting stored in the event viewer. I didn't want to do that anymore because that was just a lot. And so I did ETW down to this, and now everything goes via the manifest into the event viewer. So there's that. And guys, feel free to stop me at any point if you want to ask a question or go over anything.
I do like the latest diagram there, because I was referencing your older one prior for some cool stuff I was geeking out on, because I was curious the reasoning between the user mode and the kernel mode. And yeah, this
is way more accurate of how like actual commercial EDRs are going to do it for the most part. So I wanted to update that, partially because I wanted to play with trace log and ETW, but I wanted to keep everything in this. I wanted the driver to do as minimal as possible. I wanted to just, you know, collect these kernel callbacks, ship it, and that's it. That way it's super fast. I don't need to deal with multi-threading like I was in 1.0. It just kind of made life easier that way. And here's the config. I will say here in a moment when I show my you know, Windows 11 box and I'll demo JonMon, there's an updated config file. Actually, yeah, there's an updated config file in here that you'll be able to see whenever I show it. So just bear with that. I updated it literally last night, and I just haven't pushed it out. But it was just a config file. It's very basic. It's just like, you know, process creation events, enable, true, false, whatever it may be. I don't have the ability for you to put in processes, files, whatever it may be. That'd be a lot of work and very doable. I just didn't do it. So I did this JSON because I hate XML with a passion. So JSON is the way to go. EDR written by a Editex engineer. JSON is better than all. And so to kind of get into the events that are possible, I'll show you the manifest here. I'll scroll all the way down because this is a thick file. Down here, you'll see a bunch of things. And like, there's a lot of things that are in the 1.0 that are in here. So like, obviously the basic process creation, remote thread creation, image load, process access, save keys for registry, set keys, create keys, file creation. What I will say is different, is nice, is there's now mail slot creation and connections. There's also, I found a way to log remote file creations. So if someone creates a file on your box from a remote system, I can log that. There is still like WMI, event filter, RPC server. But the cool thing is there is AMSI in here, and there are different events for the threat intelligence provider. There's remote read, remote write, remote virtual allocation, remote queues or ABC. There's still query token impersonation, then I have like a debug log, which no one's really going to care about. This will expand. I have a bunch of things coming down the pipe. Like I just recently wrote a blog on like token impersonation in 24H2. That's going to be an event in here that will be allowed through the threat intelligence ETW provider. But I don't have all this documented yet. That's why I'm having to show you guys the code straight up, because again, I'm lazy. I haven't done that yet. The cool magic happens, in my opinion, in the user mode portion. I mean, for those that care, I can show you the driver. It's significantly smaller than it was before. As you can see, like this is kind of how the config is happening. It's checking. It'll enable things along the way. But the whole purpose of all of this is literally grab the information and then as soon as you can, send it via trace login down. I mean, that way I'm not doing any processing in the kernel. That's going to take up like a bunch of memory. I'm not going to have any like, you know, leaking of memory because, you know, for those that care, first version JonMon had a little bit of that. So this fixes a lot of that. And so it's very fast, which is nice. So the magic, in my opinion, really happens in the user mode portion. This is where I've spent most of my time of development. So the options, which I'll demo all this here in a moment. When you open up JonMon, you'll have a couple options. You'll have a -c. You'll pass in a config file that'll just tell you like what enables and what's not. -i, per usual, is going to actually install JonMon. You see like mini filter settings being done here because I recently took away, if anybody read my tweet, I took away INF files because I was just kind of like a pain I don't want to deal with anymore. So for the cool stuff like ETW, that's what, I mean, that besides like processing, I mean, even then, like the user mode side is mainly doing ETW processing and there's a lot of it happening. So inside of here, what'll happen inside this trace event function, you'll see that there are a bunch of checks that happen. Like if something is enabled, go ahead and enable that inside of the provider, which I'll show you. So like if you wanted to trim down JonMon and basically like, I only want threat intelligence events. It's like, great, you can just enable only that. And if something pops up that are from the events that are supported, it'll give you it. I wanted to give that to people because you don't need everything. And if you have, you know, a reasoning that, you know, you want to keep it nice and small, you have that. You have that capability. So the processing of AMSI. If I knew how to type. Here we go. Okay, yeah. So
you mentioned it was a little tricky. What was tricky?
Yeah. So with yeah, good sigh. With AMSI, there was you have this information in here. So let's find it here. Yeah, you have session, app name, and I only support like VBScript, JScript, Office VBA, Excel. This is all for a reasoning because one thing I do try to do inside of here is I try to decode the content of the AMSI for you. And this is where it's a pain. Instead of, for those that don't know, what'll happen is you'll get like the content, you'll get a byte array essentially. And it's like, great, like something happened with VBScript, but now I gotta like go and find this thing. And it was like, what do you do with that? And so I was like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm going to decode this thing. And it worked out, you know, it was easier than I kind of anticipated. It was nice, but this is like kind of, this one line took me a little bit because I had to figure out how I wanted to do it. And there are other ones like, for example, a .NET, I believe you can collect with AMSI, but I believe it gives you the full PE. It's not like necessary. I mean, it's kind of a lot to process. And I really didn't want to process all of that. And the way that I see it, one thing that we have to keep in mind when it comes to detection engineering is having telemetry overlap. And so like, for example, do I really need to collect inside of AMSI .NET events if I'm collecting from the .NET ETW provider? The answer is probably no. So I remove that completely inside of AMSI and I only do like VBScript, JScript because I have nothing else that's collecting VBScript or JScript or Office VBA or Excel or whatever it may be. So this one line is what was kind of a pain, which it's kind of funny, like, oh, it's only one line. But yeah, good luck figuring that out because that took me a little bit. But it's here for you if anybody's curious. So it'll ship down the decoded string now, which is
That's
awesome.
cool. That's very cool.
Which I can show that off here in a little bit. But yeah, that is, I'll stop sharing the code here, but essentially, if anybody's curious, it'll be out. But I mean, that's kind of where
soon,
next week for sure. I just got to do all the documentation. That's all it is. I mean, but I'm just lazy. So But yeah, that's the code.
That is awesome. I'm excited for those updates.
Yeah, I think, and again, for people, what I try to tell people is like, play with JonMon. Like I can't express this enough. I think the importance of detection engineers, to an extent, at least being able to read code. Like for the junior detection DEs, you don't necessarily need to, but this is super important because I try to tell people all the time. It's like our job as detection engineers are built on telemetry and data, right? And how are we supposed to do our job and go to the company or organization or customer and be like, I'm protecting you by having this detection, or I have this alert set up? How are they supposed to trust you if you can't trust your telemetry? And you don't know the telemetry unless you play with it. Now, given, albeit that like the majority of these sensors, I mean, they're not going to be open source, but playing with it, understanding these mechanisms, et cetera, are just incredibly important in my opinion. So
I think it's good for, like you pointed out, new people or people are just getting started with this type of thing, having different sensors that look and see the differences, right? You touched on like comparing like a Sysmon or an Elastic. Because to go get a, just, hey, I'm going to go get a trial license of CrowdStrike or Cortex DFE, probably not going to happen of just getting those. But having those other ones and running tests like Atomic Red Team or Atomic Test Harnesses, great way to compare data sources and kind of see. Definitely curious with the new changes in V2, kind of like what some of those new outputs look like if you run some tests or kind of see like what they are.
You want to see right now?
I do. Let's jump into some data.
All right, cool. Share screen here. It's going to go through this whole process again. You guys see that? It's on an ultra wide. Is that okay? Is it great? Is it working? Oh, it's working great. Perfect. I'd love to see that. Okay, so I actually just ran this in anticipation for this. So like I mentioned,
enhance just a little bit.
No, everybody has to see the very smallness. So I can also do this here. Yeah. Perfect. So this is the new config file. I mean, what's being broken up here. Before you saw like these embedded members that said like enable, true or false. I removed all that because it's stupid and I didn't need to do it. But like threat intelligence events, like what I allow you to do now is specify which ones that you want specifically. So you don't have to have them all if you don't want to. And I'm going to do the same thing for like process or file events. That way you can say like, I want mail slots, but I don't want name pipes. I want remote files only, but I don't want local file creations. Like you have that ability to do that. So that is an update that will be coming. And like I mentioned, I mean, running JonMon, here, I'll just uninstall this puppy real quick. If I knew how to type, my hands are cold. So super easy. I have the event viewer open, so it's gonna like say I can't delete this thing, but the manifest, and then it just installs. It's literally this easy. This happened because I have the event viewer open because it loads that. But anyways, it's literally that easy. You can also do something like config, so you can do it. What happens with the config is it'll automatically like pick this up, put it in like C windows, and it'll just be like, oh, I'm going to use this config. So that's also another route that you can go. But here are all the events. I mean, you can kind of see there's a lot of these. So like this one right here, this is the image load event. You go to the details. You have, so one thing in 1.0 what I had is like, let's take an image load, for example. I had two different events. One was for a regular image load, and the other one was like a driver load event. Instead what I did was I combined them, and because they come from the same callback, and there's this attribute here called system mode image. And when the system mode image is 1, that's when it's a driver, and 0 is when it's a user mode binary. So what it allows me to do is just ship it down easier, and then combine the data and just keep everything nice and clean. I'm not having to like redo a whole bunch. So that's kind of nice. Here is like even at E5, this is just like a process access event. And so same thing here. With what's cool about this is not only like regular handle opens, but this is also like duplication of handles. So like if you have a handle that was duplicated, this will pick that up as well, which is super nice. This is the debug. This is basically letting me know that like my process has changed to a protected process. So I should be running everything just fine. Here's like an example of event ID 21. This is a network events. You have the process file path. You have the source estimation IPs, initiated false. You have the logon IDs. Everything is going to have a logon ID to it. For those that don't know me, I'm a big advocate for like logon sessions and logon IDs as for correlation. So everything in here has a logon ID tied to it, which is kind of nice. So, however, I think I want to say it's event ID. I'm about to make myself look stupid here. 22. Aha. So this is the AMZ event. I just ran like a basic JavaScript here. I could always just do it again because why not? We're live. Run it live.
Everybody likes it live.
Everybody like that. If I could type, man, today's tough. So yeah, basically just this JavaScript that just opens up Notepad. So what AMZ will do, it'll just collect this, it'll spit it out. It'll tell you like there's this process called cscript. It ran a JScript app name from this file. Here is the content from a byte array perspective, but here's the decoded content. And like this right here is what I did not see a lot of people doing. I mean, that's kind of like a big thing that I wanted from AMZ was like if I wanted to be there, I wanted to be usable, right? Another really cool event that I know people will like. I'm about to make myself look stupid again. Aha, 23. So is dumping LSAS via remote read process memory. So like when someone like goes to like you have one source process and it's like, hey, I want to read the process memory of another. You have that. Here are the events for that as well. And so LSAS PowerShell. I just did like an atomic test harness here for invoke dump LSAS. You have process start keys in here. You have a lot of great information. 24 is going to be remote write, which is nice in situations. Now, this is what's interesting is like nothing was injected from me maliciously on this machine, but this is like the important bit of having this information is you start to realize that there are other processes that are writing to the memory of other processes. So like, for example, since I are from CSRSS here, what's that about? Not really sure, but it happened. So services into trusted installer as well. So that's kind of cool. You can play with that. And there's other ones like remote allocation. I don't know if I go to 25, there's going to be anything. I mean, I doubt there's going to be anything. Just kidding. There's a lot. So it's a bunch of edge stuff, which is kind of makes sense. I know 26 won't be there because I didn't run anything, but I'm still going to check now because why not? 26 is there. Definitely more than I thought. But anyways, this is user APC, remote user APC. So yeah, this is kind of the information there. I'm trying to think of some other really cool ones. I know one that
RPC data.
That's exactly what I was just about to pull up for you.
I think that is one of the most underutilized sources that most EDRs are not collecting, or they're not presenting it in a way that people can actually query or utilize that data. Probably collecting it in a way for backend telemetry detection, but not actual usage.
Yep. 1 second. I don't even remember what event ID that is. So bear with me. 18 and 19, I believe. Okay. Because it's different than what it used to be. I changed up all the event IDs. It used to be 11 and 12. Hence why you see that. There we go. So let me run something because I'm only doing a couple of different interfaces. So let me do test atomic bin path equals home desktop. Actually, let's just do C Windows System 32. It doesn't really matter. Okay, that's not what I wanted. So let's just redo this. People who watch me play inside of a CLI will realize I get upset when it doesn't do what I want. And so I'll just start from the beginning, which is probably not necessary, but that's what I do anyways. So great, it was created. So inside of here, you see RPC server events, and you will see the call stack as well when it comes to this. But you see services.exe executed something. It looks like rcreate service W. There's an important thing to point out here. You might ask yourself, why is there not RPC client events? And this is like one thing that we have to ask ourselves. SS engineers, if something's supported or whatever it may be. Inside of my code, if I'm not able to pull back the binary within a certain amount of time, or it's not, so the way that the user mode side of HAP works is I query processes every so often. I store the information about that process, and then I get rid of it. So anytime an event happens, it'll go and check to see if that process exists. Because if I go and try to do a process lookup at that time, I mean, you saw sc.exe existed for a very, I mean, it was basically, it was there and it was gone. I mean, there's, you know, so if I did it at runtime, it wouldn't be there. Now there is an option per se. It could be like, oh, every process that starts, I want to lock it. And it's like, nah, I don't want to necessarily do that. So in some instances, you will see the client if it lives long enough. Other instances, you won't. So let's take another example here. So I have a PowerShell thing open, and if I just do a new service, name, test, atomic. If this doesn't work, I'm gonna look real stupid, but I have a lot of confidence right now. Okay, so this thing started. Have a new event. There we go. Whew, I was about to look real dumb. Okay, so since that happened, I was able to. I mean, I'm able to have the client side, and you saw. I mean, I didn't even have the PowerShell prompt open long. I mean, the way I'm doing it is very, very fast in the user mode portion, but you know, there are race conditions. Someone could beat me out if they really wanted to, but see much of unknowns here. That could just be symbol issues, or it could be whatever. It's probably because of my or how PowerShell's doing that. But anyways, long story short, it goes to create service W and it goes all the way down the pipe. You see the client did this from PowerShell, and then you can correlate that over here. That's service.exe, same interface, same time, R create service W, great. You should see the methods string over here. So you could correlate these two events and find the actual source of where the RPC event came from, which is cool.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Based on the data that you've collected with JonMon, how have you used it to like better understand or refine detection strategies?
No, that's a good question. I think a big thing for me is it's not always as simple as it seems. So what I mean by that is when it comes to detection, we always in our heads, we're like, oh, what's the perfect scenario? I would need X, Y, Z, A, B, C in order to create said detection. And I think for me, what I've learned is that maybe isn't always needed or necessary. And is there a situation where I can have a partial solution instead of the perfect solution? Because not everything that you want, I'm very hesitant to say that you're not able to pull whatever telemetry you want from the OS. I'm not going to say that, but it might be very resource intensive and it might not be practical to do. And so I think a lot of times you'll see in detection, someone's like, oh, I can't create a detection for this, so here it is. And I think this is why it's really important. You know, Jared Atkinson has done a lot of work on this, so has others. But like detection layering, telemetry layering, whatever it may be, because you might be able to do something with what you have. And I think it's also a big thing from a detection strategy perspective is having good comms with whatever product you're using, is giving feedback to them and saying, hey, like we could really use this data, whatever it may be, get in that feedback loop. I think that is very important.
Mm-hmm.
But JonMon's helped me a lot because when I see something on the Twitterverse of someone being like, this new red team tool has dropped, or like this thing is so like undetectable, I'm like, all right, well, let me just kind of go look real quick. And if I find something, it's nice to know that, like, you know, I can see data for this, but man, like, just because I can pull data, is that useful to a detection engineer? And I know I'm rambling, but I'll say this too. I think it's important whenever it comes to these sensors to remember there's a difference between what a detection engineer needs versus a SOC analyst versus someone who, like a threat hunter, right? Everyone needs a different data source. And the problem with a lot of EDRs is they're trying to satisfy the masses. And I think that is incredibly hard. And so you kind of have to pick and choose sometimes. Okay, like this is for a detection engineer, and then maybe a threat hunter is going to be like, okay, well, I'm just going to have to use what I got here and deal with that. But I think the number one priority for sensors need to be detection. I think remediation, investigation, and threat hunting should always come second, because you can't have an initial alert unless you focus on detection there. So does that kind of answer that question a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just curious. It's a neat project, right? Like, because you're kind of going deep into like you said, like right into EDR land here, and you're refining it for yourself. It's really cool. Really dig
Yeah,
it.
I appreciate it, and I love to hear feedback from people when it comes to it as well. I think that's like nice to see how people are using it, because I mean, I'm only one person. Like, my assumptions could be wrong in certain aspects, and so it's definitely fun to play with those. But what I think I find more interesting is whenever you start to play with this or looking at this, you ask yourself like, okay, now what's next? Like, what else is possible? And I think, like, I mean, that's how, for the longest time, I mean, Paul, you remember this because we talked about this. I mean, this might have been back in our Red Canary days, but we thought about RPC all the time, and we would talk to other sensors, and a lot of people would be like, oh yeah, RPC is cool, but like, no one's really going to do that. It's very loud. And that's true. It is very loud. But the question is, like, what if you approach it from a very precise standpoint of like picking up known bad, picking up what adversaries are using all the time? Could you at least take this data source that is very loud and use it productively, and like not have a sensor that's taking a whole bunch of resources on this? Because I mean, JonMon's very, I mean, I forgot to show this. If you pull up Task Manager and JonMon's running, I mean, it's memory wise, I mean, it's probably, I think last I checked, it was like 3.5 megabytes. I mean, it's small. I mean, it's not
That's
doing
really good.
Yeah, it's great. So
That's very cool.
If you're able to approach something from a filter, you don't need everything to start. I think having a filtered approach and having a targeted approach, the known bad should be the number one priority. And then opening it up, because how many engineering teams do you go into, detection engineering teams, or SOCs or whatever, SIMs, and what's you don't know. Olaf, yeah, shout out, thanks for making me have a headache with ARM, Olaf, I appreciate you. How many times have you gone into like a SIM and it's like you have all this data, what's the percentage of it actually being used?
Yeah.
Like, is it actually being leveraged, or is it just there because hey, we got it, we have it, we can do something with it? And I don't know, I just think having a more targeted approach is probably more beneficial than not.
I kind of look at like the same idea, taking RBC, for example, probably a lot more practical use cases and a lot more filtering you could do than, say, something like file telemetry. Like, think of the amount of times files are opened, written, created, deleted on a system at any given point, right? Even just a browser, for example, there's tons of it. But then it sits into your SIM, and then how much of that is actually getting utilized, right? Like, there's tons of it that's actually not being utilized. So we say, just give me all the telemetry and I'll figure it out.
Yep.
Well, you have all this telemetry and we don't use all of it. So we don't need more. We just need better filtering, better telemetry that comes in that allows us to do detection at breadth, at depth, right?
Yep.
Like, RPC is the perfect use case, right? Like, how many ways can you create a service? Whether it's a tools or via API call.
Oh, 100%, right? I think like yeah, that's a good topic. I mean, it's one of those things too when it comes to telemetry. Like, I mean, I can think of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Where's Jared's graph? I reference that all the time. There's probably like, he's got there's probably like 10 or 12 different tools. There's probably like 8 different API calls, and they all filter in, and guess where they all end up?
The question too becomes like,
and they go to registry.
Well, exactly. And the thing is like, okay, from a service creation standpoint, I think this is easy to talk about. I think service creation and dumping offsets are like the most prominent, use cases here, examples. Like, for service creation in itself, in my head right now, I can think of 4 different ways to collect that from a telemetry standpoint, not just like how many different ways can a tool do this? So like, for example, you can pull this via the Windows security event, 4760 or 4967 or 4697. I think it's 4697. And how that is happening within services.exe. It's on the RPC server side. Now that's important. Okay, and I'll touch on that here in a moment. You can also do it via the 7045 inside the system log. That's also on the server side. And I'll get to that in a moment on the RPC moment. So that's 2 different ways, and they're similar. Okay, you could also pull that information via RPC like I showed you, and that's the client and server side. So that's awesome. right? I thought my dog was whining. And then the fourth one that I can think of is via the registry, right? Now, what's the difference here? Now, when a service is created, it is a requirement that is created in the registry. It's not a requirement that is created with RPC. So if you have these different, telemetry sources that are pulling via RPC, that's great, awesome. But there is a blind spot. Now, that doesn't mean that collecting those is a bad way to collect them. It just means that you need to be aware of what that blind spot is, because if you're creating detections and that is a blind spot, you now inherited that blind spot into your detection because it came from your telemetry. And a lot of people don't see that. I mean, we talk about EDR bypassing and things like that all the time. And I think this is something that when it comes to bypassing, and I think I saw something like this on Twitter the other day, the further you are down the pipe, the more you inherited from the beginning of the pipe. And so what I mean by that is if there's a blind spot from the collection, there's going to inherently be a blind spot in the detection. Now, let's say you do more filtering. Now there's more of a blind spot. And so this all accumulates down the pipe and clogs. And so the further you are down the pipe, the more you've inherited from further up the pipe. And I think that's important. And this is one thing I've realized with JonMon, right? It's like, I can go grab telemetry kind of wherever. I can do RPC, I can do ANS, I can do registry, I can do whatever, right? But what's the best solution for a detection engineer with the least amount of blind spots? Because they're going to have blind spots in their detection. So at the end of the funnel, at the end of the pipeline, they have the least amount of blind spots. And I think I use blind spots probably 40 times in that paragraph. But I think that's super imperative. And that's kind of one thing, Jared and I, we've talked about a lot. We still talk about this because it's one of those things where you can go do something 100 different ways. But what's also important is how many ways can you collect telemetry from it? And then from the data or the way that you collect that, can you pull the proper attributes you need for a detection? There's all of these things that I don't think a lot of people think of, like 7045, when it'll say a new service was installed on a machine. That's awesome. Cool. Not really, in my opinion, useful for a detection because it doesn't show you much else besides that. I mean, the FreakS97, the same thing. Even if you collect it from the registry, it can be difficult because the majority of the time, who's going to create that? Well, the server, the RPC. So then what do we do? Try to have these. Did I cut out there for a second? Okay, yeah, my headphones just told me I have 10%, so YOLO.
No.
Anyways, you want to do telemetry layering there because what's nice though is if you have a SIM, you're doing 4697, and you have these RPC events, put it all together. Thanks for my TED Talk.
We have an interesting question.
Yeah.
Come up. Any thoughts on long-term collecting the syscalls per process similar to ETW syscall monitor from JDU 2600?
Collecting syscalls per process. Maybe for research, not at if you're talking about collecting syscalls, everything does a syscall. I mean, when you create a process, create process W that makes a syscall. Thing about syscalls too is they're just a numeric value that gets shipped over, so you'd have to be able to, per version, be able to relate that to what value that relates to in the syscall table and that all other stuff. So say we go that way. What I will say is you probably saw in one of the events with RPC is I have a call stack. I think that is very valuable to have because it kind of gives you insight into function calls that people are leveraging when executing certain tools. But collecting at scale syscalls, I mean, I think there are people doing it and API hooking, things like that. I think that's, there are some limitations, and I think I saw somebody the other day mention about ADV API 32 and it was token adjust privilege. You could do it at a lower level. So it's kind of I see value in that from research. I don't know if I see that from a practical standpoint at scale. So I think I've seen that project from JDU. They always do great work. So
says update. I think that project was hashing the call stack orders.
Oh, if you want to, yeah, if you want the call stack, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think I just got a request in from Matt Graber about like in the config having the ability to like say if you want the call stack for a certain event. I think that'd be awesome. I think having call stacks is phenomenal. I think it's a great way to get extra context that might be needed. It's also nice from like an intelligence standpoint from threat intel, because when it comes to like tooling, versioning, whatever it may be, you have all that. So
I think Elastic's doing a lot with call stacks lately.
They wrote a phenomenal blog. I can't remember which one it is, because I remember Samir wrote something on Twitter about it, but there is a great blog by Elastic on call stacks, and I thought it was awesome. It's about time people are looking at call stacks. I mean, that's a rich data source that could be used. So yeah, that blog, if anybody hasn't read that, that's a great blog.
Yeah. Phenomenal. JonMon 2.0 to the world. So what can we expect and when can we expect 3.0?
I don't know if there'll ever be a 3.0, because the reason why I made it 2.0 was because I knew 1.0 from a like development perspective wasn't great, but 2.0 doesn't have any like, it's not going to crash it shouldn't crash your machine. So, for all those listening, do not run this on production machines. This is purely a research project. Put it in test sunny mode in the VM and go play with it. There won't be a 3.0, but it will be updated as time goes on, because I have another project called ECW Inspector that was out. There's a 2.0 version of that coming out because it's in C# instead of C++. And I do have plans to make all that streamlined. So like if you found a new ETW provider and you want to collect events from said thing, and then potentially adding something yeah. Okay. So let me talk about that for a second. Olaf really calling me out right now. Okay. So yeah, I'll say this. It will be fixed by the time I release it. Sorry for everybody's like seeing me half face right now. I'm on a standing desk and my apartment got flooded. So I'm currently at someone else's place doing this. So that's why you see like I step back. I'm so short. I step back. You see like half my face. So JonMon works on 24H2. It will not collect threat intelligence events because it will not run as PPL, because I have to do a version check. Because I just made a tweet about this today, the e-process structure changed. Now, would I have to do that if I created an Elon driver, which I have done before, and just use that? No, I would not have to do that. The question is, at some point, JonMon will have an Elon driver. Is it going to be out next week? Probably not. Oh, well, thanks for calling me out to the max. So thanks. I do a hacky way to get PPL. I just basically have a drivers, and you're already in test hunting mode. So I just go and change those e-process offsets on the fly, which you should not do. Do not try this at home, kids. So
I was waiting for somebody to be like, I deploy this out to like 1,000 servers and collecting it and shipping it off into like a
Listen, I will say I have not done a lot of documentation on JonMon, but one thing I will say is documentation I have done is mostly around disclaimers about do not like post this in a product. I am not in charge of this. I'm not responsible. So
where's your hacking disclaimer? The educational purposes only.
Yeah, I know. I'm curious too. One thing I'd be curious is I can't wait for this is when JonMon 2.0 is out, and I'd like to see all the C2s tell me they can bypass JonMon. They probably can, but my requirement is if you're going to make a tweet or PR about bypassing JonMon with a C2, you have to give me a free license to said C2 so I can test it myself.
Yeah, we don't just blindly trust what people post on the internet.
Yeah, please give license.
Show config, show proof. Don't just show up and be like, oh, I bypassed it and called it a day. Like, don't try and hide it. Oh, it's my tradecraft. Like, no, it doesn't. It's not how it works. I'll call it out all day.
You can't have your cake and eat it. So don't tell me you could do something and then not let me prove it. So
love it. Well, coming up. Thank you for coming on and showing this. Excited to get JonMon 2.0 into the hands of people and get testing and showcasing some awesome data and telemetry collection.
Yeah, no, thank you guys for having me on. This was the kick in the right direction. I needed to actually finally release it. So
I've only been waiting like 6 months.
I know. I mean, I've been nerding out with like Olaf and like Matt Graver and some other buddies, like on with you, Paul, even like showing it off. And I'm just like, oh, here's this thing. And then other people were like,
I think it was like, what was it, July or August of last year you're talking about it? I'm like, oh, when you're done, like, just let me know. We'll come on Atomics and we'll nerd out on it. And then
yeah, and then like what, a week or two ago, I was like, here's the binaries.
Yeah. I think even like, I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks ago, you're like, oh, I think it's done. I was like, cool, let's book it for January. And then like 2 weeks ago, got the binary. So it's been awesome to get hands on.
So.
But
That's
next,
hilarious.
we have another exciting one for February planned. We got Mauricio finally coming on, who we've also been trying to get on for many, many moons to come and talk about MS Invader.
Yeah, that's I know. I feel like we've been bugging him for 2 years.
This is year
But we're
3 for
here.
us, so
3 years. Yeah. Gosh, have we been doing this for 3 years?
allegedly.
Allegedly. My wife says that to me. Allegedly. Oh, that's hilarious. Yes, February 21st, 27 days from now, same place. We will have Mauricio. MS
You know where to
Invaders
find
will
us.
be hacking the clouds or something in the clouds. But Johnny, this was awesome. Thank you. I'm excited for 2 to be released so then I can play with it since I didn't get the binaries.
My bad.
It's funny is it's in the same Slack channel too.
It is.
You're,
Yeah.
you're
for reals?
one DM thread off of having it.
Yeah.
Man.
you control that Slack. Just go pull it. We all know you got
Man.
admin rights. Yeah.
I just
But
posted in there.
That is sad.
yeah, it'll be out next week. So
Cool.
let me know.
I'll get
Like,
the
let me know what you
official release.
think, and I'm happy to hear people's feedback. Or if people hate it, please let me live in this world of thinking that people love
Oh,
it.
I heard that like ASCII art is do or die. Is there any ASCII art involved with this? project?
Absolutely not. No, I think ASCII art is like definitely 2016 tool creation. If Olaf can hear me right now, I'm specifically calling him out. But I will not have ASCII art in there whatsoever.
I'll submit
Okay.
a PR for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll write the code for it, and then you just hit merge, and it'll be good to go.
Yeah, there we go. So
Excellent. Yeah, there was some heated discussions on my poll the other day. I was like, whoa.
yeah, ASCII art is always I feel like do or die. So
Yes. Excellent. Well, thank you, Johnny. Appreciate it.
Thanks again, buddy.
And yeah,
Thanks for
we already
tuning
got
in.
our first comment coming in already.
Tool hasn't even been released. Not even gonna touch it. Throw it
Yeah.
out. Delete the code.
I told you.
This is my excuse not to do the documentation
over.
here and just never release it. So
So, yep, this is it. Oh.
thanks, guys.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you all
Thanks,
for
y'all.
joining, and
Catch you next
have a
month.
great weekend.
Everyone,
Toodles.
bye.
See you.